I'm JJ Heller, and this is Instrumental, a show about the big and small moments that shape our lives. Big love happens in the small moments. Hi, everybody, it's JJ.
And this is her husband, Dave.
And we're excited about this episode today. We interview our friend, Kelli Kelley, which is kind of an awesome name.
It's like if your name was JJJJ.
That's a lot of J's.
Well, we found out about Kelli back in 2015 because, JJ, you had the idea to start getting your I Dream of You lullaby CDs into the hands of families in NICUs, which are neonatal intensive care units, the place in the hospital where premature babies are cared for.
That's right. After we released that album, a bunch of parents with babies in the NICU and nurses working in the NICU sent us all of these messages saying that they would play our music and it would have a really calming and soothing effect on these teeny tiny babies.
And on their families.
That's right. And so we decided, well, what if we became more proactive about this and tried to get as many copies of our CDs into NICUs all across the country as we could?
This was back when people were still listening to CDs.
True. So one thing led to another, and we crossed paths with Kelli Kelley.
And Kelli is the founder of an organization called Hand to Hold, which just happens to be the name of one of your most popular songs, JJ, and the title of your upcoming children's book.
So true.
But Kelli's Hand to Hold is a nonprofit in Austin, Texas that provides powerful resources to families before, during, and after a stay in the NICU.
They've served thousands of families over the 10 years since Kelli founded Hand to Hold. And they're a national leader when it comes to educating and serving NICU families through their podcasts, printed resources, and support groups.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this episode. It's a powerful example of how someone's difficult experience can become an amazing motivator to help other people. Just a quick note, we ran into a few technical difficulties during our interview, and so the audio quality kind of changes from high quality mic to computer mic and back to high quality mic a couple of times. So if that happens, don't freak out. It's normal. Well, it's not normal, but, you know, I warned you in advance. All right, JJ, let's hear it.
Act 3, Peer Mentors. Kelli is a mother of 2 children who were both born premature. Her own personal birth experiences give her unique insight when it comes to the needs of the families she serves. One of the most important services Hand to Hold provides is connecting families with similar NICU experiences. Here's Kelli.
We capture a lot of information with our peer mentors about their birth experience. Did they have preeclampsia? Were they on bed rest? Had they had a previous loss? How many other children do they have? What diagnosis did the baby have? How long were they in the NICU? What challenges do you have today?
You're like Match.com for premie families, basically.
It is. And I tell you, the person who does my matching is an incredible person. I've known her a long, long time, and I worked with her previously. And when we had the opportunity to hire her to do this, and just how it has blossomed under her because of the level of personal care that she gives to each one of these matches and following up with each one.
I just think it's so powerful because it's not necessarily the role of every nurse, or that every nurse is, has that same level of emotional connection with the family. But our family support specialists, that is their role, just to be there with families. And it is just amazing that we have parents that can be there. Just yesterday, one of the families had to be transferred. The baby had to be transferred to another hospital. And we were about to have our holiday party. And my family support specialist was like, I have to go to the hospital. I have to be there for this. And we were like, absolutely. But that's the priority, right? To be there with the families throughout their NICU stay. And, stories of our family support specialists sitting on the floor with families when their baby passed away, and like physically holding their hand and being that level of care. And I honestly don't know how they do it day in and day out, but I am just so grateful that these people have found hand to hold and wanted to take this journey with us, and the impact that they're having in the hospitals. One of the programs I love the most that we do is our milestone bead program, and it's a silver necklace with a charm of stork on it. But it's so significant because when you have a baby in the NICU, it's not like people are congratulating you. It's not a time of joy necessarily. And so we pause and recognize that you're a mom and you have a baby, and we're celebrating this with you, and we're telling you we're going to be here with you throughout your journey. And they get a card saying as such and introducing them to our program. And then when they change the first diaper, they get a silver diaper pen charm. When they bathe the baby, they get a silver duck charm. You talk about it being the moments, JJ, the moments in our lives. Those are the milestones that we don't want to take for granted in the NICU. Those are important when you have a newborn baby, right? And exciting things that you do. But when you're in the NICU and you've had a 1-pound baby and you're finally holding them for the first time, that's a major milestone. And so we want to bring joy into the NICU. And so we talk about it like it's so much more than jewelry. It is a remembrance of the journey, and they wear them with pride. And we get so many beautiful pictures back of parents wearing the necklace or the bracelet, having their NICU graduates photos made with the necklaces to show their journey. It's just a beautiful thing, and I just love it. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of.
Well, it sounds like what you're doing is, if these families can't bring their baby home, in a way, you're kind of bringing home into the NICU to celebrate, right?
Absolutely. And it is a teaching tool. Nurses talk to us about it being a teaching tool because, it's very hard to bond. And, oftentimes it's the first time you touch your baby is when you're changing the diaper, because you're not able to pick them up and hold them. And changing a diaper on a 1-pound baby is not easy. And I just remember like my hands shaking and trembling, so scared to touch him and hurt him, and a nurse guiding me through that process. And it is those tiny steps that teach you how to take care of this medically fragile baby. And we don't want to wait until a few days before you're taking this baby home for you to be part of their care team. Right? So we want to normalize it. We want you to feel like a parent, and we want you there, and we want you to be interacting with the baby as much as possible. So it's a small thing, but it is actually a major thing within the NICU.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about how for so many of these parents, they probably feel isolated and they don't really know what to do. And so for Hand to Hold to come along and be so intentional about saying, we acknowledge this and we see you. And here's a necklace to celebrate this big deal. It's a big deal to you. I mean, the rest of the world may not get it, but we get it.
Yeah.
And we're going to honor you in this moment.
Absolutely. And of course, the coveted charm is the house, because it signifies you're going home. And we've had some people, I'm not kidding, say, when they're being told they're getting discharged, they're like, but I haven't gotten my bead today. Like, I need to get my, they're like, we're going to make sure that you get that. Don't worry. But it is such an important part of their journey and gives them something to look forward to.
I don't come from this kind of clinical background or training and counseling or anything like that. I, went to a spiritual gifts class many years ago and identified spiritual gifts of having empathy, but I thought that was a weakness. I saw it as a weakness. And it was only later that I understood that there are other people who do not have that gift of empathy. They cannot sit with someone in pain. It makes them very uncomfortable, and they would run away from that level of intimacy and connectedness and support. So it took me realizing that these are my gifts. I have the personal experience to back it up. And then going out and finding those experts and joining in that dialogue. And I was really lucky early on. I was invited by a pharmaceutical company to come to a meeting, and they had invited some other moms like me, some dads too, that had started programs in their states to provide support to NICU families. I didn't even know they were out there. Like, I had done some Google searching before I started all of this, but I did not find other organizations that were doing what I was wanting to do. And so I was just dumbfounded that I was coming together with this group of other like-minded parents. And I still remember the first time sitting with these families and hearing their stories, and they were so similar to mine. At that point, I was 10 years out from Jackson's birth, but still so scarred from it and still healing from the trauma. And we all were. And it just felt like for the first time that I was with my people. I had found my people, and people that were doing the hard work I was trying to do. And they were having a hard time getting into hospitals, getting professionals to listen to them. And so thank goodness for the wisdom of that pharmaceutical company who kind of on a national level had seen us through our advocacy work and said, y'all come together. You're going to be more powerful together. And we left that meeting. We decided to form an organization, a national organization. At the time, we were the Premie Parent Alliance. We have changed our name. We are the NICU Parent Network now, but those are still some of my best friends, my tribe. We have accomplished so much together on a national level, uniting our voices to speak out for, be the voice for all these NICU and bereaved families. I remember it being at a really nice hotel, and I was so excited when I walked into that hotel room because I hadn't traveled without kids, I don't think ever.
Wow.
And, I had not really been away. And I just remember like putting on the robe and laying on the bed and being so excited to like just have some quiet time. But also just, it was profoundly emotional to meet those parents and to hear their stories. And I so clearly remember like sitting on a bench outside at night with this mom that I had heard about. Her name is Kira Sorrells. I think we could have talked for weeks, and we just connected on such a deep level. Similar experiences, but different. Kira delivered triplets very preterm, and her daughter Zoe lived for a year, had been discharged from the hospital and got sick shortly after coming home, and she had lost Zoe. And so she had founded an organization called the Zoe Rose Foundation in honor of her daughter, and was raising her other two daughters who had a lot of medical challenges and developmental challenges, learning delays, just like mine, and trying to start this organization. And so we just connected on such an emotional level of the trauma we had experienced and the long-term impact of that trauma, and not going as early as we should have and could have to talk to a therapist and to get support. And I felt like she was my sister. And having her to I'm so sorry. Just having her to walk through this with has meant so much. And having her to call when you had a good day and something to celebrate, or when something didn't go well. And we still do that. We talked yesterday. She knew that I was coming on this show, and I asked her to pray for me. I was like, I'm going to cry. And she knows I'm a crier. But we both feel so strongly about overcoming our fears. She and I both struggle with anxiety and self-confidence and putting ourselves out there to share our stories and to be the only parent at some of these really big meetings and what that means. But she has accomplished so much, and she brings us together still. She leads what became the NICU Parent Network, and I'm still part of that leadership team and serve on the board. And she is just the most eloquent speaker and such a giving, loving person. She has a way of bringing us all together. I tend to be the one with some rough edges, and she's the one who helps me smooth those out and to always allow us to step back and see what we've accomplished and celebrate those accomplishments. And then always looking forward to, where do we really want to go? Where do we really think we can be? And knowing that we're not alone in getting to those larger goals of having those doors open at every hospital, being willing to provide that level of family support, even if it is a significant financial investment on the part of the hospital, and why that's so important.
It sounds like she's your hand to hold.
There you go, JJ. Yeah, she is. But just knowing that she's there if I need her. That is the power of hand to hold, right? We match families with a peer mentor. And I guess that's right. She's my peer mentor. I've just never really stopped to think about it in that way.
What do you remember most about sitting on that bench at night next to her for the first time?
It felt like the beginning of something really important. But we didn't really know what it was. But we knew that we had been brought together for a reason. And I just knew that we were going to be lifetime friends. You know, when you have that connection, like, I'm not going to let this person go. She's something special.
May you never lose the wonder in your soul. May you always have a blanket for the cold. May the living light inside you be the compass as you go. May you always know you have my hand to hold.
Oh, wow. I love that we began our conversation with Kelli talking about how important it is to connect with people who had similar experiences, and how her relationship with Kira mirrors the relationships she's trying to help foster between peer mentors in the families they serve.
I don't have anything to say to that. It's all good.
Yeah. So as we make our way into the story of the birth of Hand to Hold, the organization, we need to step back into the mid-2000s.
JJ, a very important shoe was super popular during this moment in time, the mid-2000s. Do you know what it was?
Crocs.
Nope.
Oh, because...
I mean, they were popular.
Yeah,
but
they're like everywhere.
that's not the one that I'm thinking of. You would see them at the mall.
At the mall.
Normally places with very smooth floors.
Oh, Heelys.
That's right. Heelys were really kind of approaching the peak of popularity.
Wow.
At that time.
I never had a pair.
Nope, we were too old.
Oh, man.
I mean, I suppose you could probably go on YouTube and find amazing videos of adults doing crazy stuff on Heelys.
Probably.
But we weren't cool enough to do that.
Something like that.
Well, as children across the country rolled their way through shopping malls,
scaring their parents half to death,
Kelli was building some momentum of her own.
Oh, nicely done. Act 2, a business card and an idea. As her children began to grow, Kelli was able to focus on her own well-being. As she discovered more and more about her own needs for emotional health and wellness, she unknowingly began to walk down a path that would improve the lives of thousands of mothers with experiences just like her own.
I felt very guilty about my feelings of, my kids survived, they're healthy, they're happy, I'm the stay-at-home mom I always wanted to be. And so I just couldn't really figure out why I didn't feel okay, why I was struggling so much, why I felt anxious all the time. And the start of Handlehold was just the start of me opening myself up to say, I think I need counseling. I think I need therapy. I think something's not right. And it started out of me talking to the hospital and the NICU director and sharing with them the challenges I had while I was in the NICU as a parent, and then after coming home. And they were just so accepting of that critique, if you will, of, my son got the best possible care, but I fell through the cracks. And I do remember sitting in that really small office, and that NICU director went on to serve on my board for many years. And we have a very, very close relationship to this day.
And is it a man or a woman?
It's a woman.
Oh, and what's her name?
Rhonda Reed.
Were you nervous walking into that meeting?
Oh, gosh, yes. I was very, very nervous. Also, I'll just say, just going back to the hospital was very emotionally challenging. I get emotional just thinking about pulling him back into the parking lot of this hospital where, my baby spent months. And
you're going back to a place of trauma.
Absolutely. And so just going there brought up a lot of anxiety in the first place. But then to even give what was, I think, constructive and critical feedback and offering help and offering support of would they be receptive to that? And I wanted to honor the care that my baby got. I wanted to also, give them some opportunity to improve, to help parents, even easy things like being able to pump breast milk. It's very, very important when you have a micro premie or any baby in the NICU for them to have breast milk. But in order to pump breast milk at the hospital at that time, you had to leave the NICU. You went to this little dark room. It was shared by other hospital staff.
Oh, gosh.
There are often men in there, and it made me really uncomfortable. It was not necessarily the most clean space you'd ever been to, and I would have to go find a unoccupied bathroom in another part of the hospital to wash the breast pump part. So it was like, why is this so broken? If they're telling me it's really important, then we need to fix this. So some of my critique was just of that, but then in sharing with them of, I never was assessed for postpartum depression. Do other people get assessed? Why was I not assessed? And no one ever talked to me about my risk factors, because NICU moms have a much higher risk factor for anxiety disorders and postpartum depression. And what typically happens is you're visiting your OB, you've gone back for your well visit after having the baby, and they do those assessments, or you're taking your baby to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician is talking to you about your emotional mental health and doing those screenings. But in my case, my baby was in the NICU for 4 months. So no one, professionally, and none of my friends or family or anyone would have known to ask me those questions. And your full focus is just on the baby, the baby's health. And so there is no time to really stop and think about your own health. Or I'm sure if people did, I would have downplayed it anyway, right? My baby's in the NICU. It makes perfect sense that I'm sad and I'm struggling and having all these fears and anxieties. So it started out with just a conversation of, these are the challenges. I'm hearing this from other families. It's really hard to connect with other families. And I even went so far as to tell them, you have a support group, but I went a couple of times and I never went back, and let me tell you why. Within the hospital, it was led by clergy. And, I am a Christian woman. My faith is at the center of my life, but I'm not Catholic. The priest, had not had children.
Okay. So the support group is a male priest who has no experience as a mother in a neonatal intensive care unit, and he's the administrator of the support group for the hospital?
Right. And I always hesitate to speak negatively about it at all because I'm grateful that they were doing it and they were trying. And I'm sure other parents found comfort in it. And when he would visit me at the bedside, it was a very different thing. I wanted him there and blessing my baby and praying with me. But it was very different when it came to support group and talking about the emotions that I was going through. And so I'll be honest and say I went mostly just to get the free pizza, but it was not the support system that I needed. And what Rhonda says today, she talked about having never realized that not every parent was receiving that level of care, and that was just heartbreaking to her. And that's what she loves about working with our organization, because now she doesn't have to worry that every single mom, dad, parent within the NICU gets that level of care and support. There are so many families in the NICU that struggle financially. So many don't speak English. So many don't have insurance. So many, like me, had to return to work to keep our insurance. Maybe they have other children at home, and trying to balance all of that and meet the needs of the medically fragile babies, those that required that most level of care and support, were top of mind for the social work department, but maybe not other moms like me who appeared to have it all together, right? I had a job, I had a husband, I spoke English, I had a college degree, I had a community of support in my family, and friends. And I will say, I went out of my way to project that everything was fine.
Right.
Not in the beginning, but over time, I, became that persona, even though I didn't truly feel like that on the inside. I was one of the first NICU parents to be invited to speak at a national nurses conference. And oh, talk about anxiety, JJ. I mean, standing up at that podium and thinking, to criticize in any way a population of people that you so respect and admire because of what they do every day. But, I knew it was important for them to hear it through the parents' eyes. And so many of them came and stood in line to talk to me afterwards, with tears in their eyes, of talking about they get disconnected because they do it every day.
Right.
And it is such a challenging job. And they can't help but form misconceptions or perceptions about parents. Why are they not here at the bedside? So hearing me say, I had to go back to work to keep my insurance, right? Understanding that if a parent comes in and you, as the nurse, did not make them feel welcome and include them in the care of the baby, and if you make them feel uncomfortable, they're going to be much more hesitant to come back. They'll feel like they are not welcome there. And so it really is important that we continue to educate nurses about the experience through the parents' eyes, but also more importantly, I think, is helping them truly understand the trauma, because it took me a long time to understand I had been through trauma. When I went for therapy, the therapy started at the NICU stay, but it took a long time to back that story up to going into labor and being alone and not knowing what was happening, and all of the fear of rushing by ambulance to a hospital and delivering preterm and not knowing if the baby would survive. All of that is part of the traumatic birth. And for many families that end up in the NICU, maybe they've been on bed rest. Maybe they've lost babies previously. So many of those moms, their lives were at stake because of preeclampsia or other medical conditions that develop. So these moms have been through trauma before they walk through the door to meet the baby. And so really elevating the discussion around maternal mental health and the higher risk factors for NICU parents, and making sure that they are screened in the NICU, talking about health inequities, making that standard of care for all NICU parents. it's not necessarily the NICU nurse's job, right?
Right.
When she went to medical school, that's not necessarily a class that you are taught how to speak to parents in trauma and through trauma
Hmm.
and provide that level of emotional support. So many of them are gifted at it, but others not so much. And so understanding the impact of their words and even the way that they look at a parent and interact with them and how they are teaching us how to parent. They are guiding us to bonding with a medically fragile child and just how incredibly important that role is.
So let's jump back into your time at the office where you kind of don't know any of that. All you know is, I didn't get what I feel like I needed. Can you help with this? And what does Rhonda say to that?
I just remember just talking about how to start. Where would we start? And where do you get the funding for that? And where could it come from? And it's not something that's ever been a line item in the budget for the NICU before. And we started really slow, really just more of kind of a volunteer effort of me identifying some other parents to come and speak at support groups and be there to help assist and meet with families.
Are these support groups run by the clergy still?
Yes, yes. So just kind of adding us to the mix, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, wanting to do some special things on Mother's Day, on Father's Day, around the holidays. So really just starting very small. And I remember pulling up in my minivan to a morning breakfast that I think I paid like $50 to $100 for. You know, I had found an early morning babysitter and it was pouring rain and I'm driving downtown and like, what do I hope to accomplish out of this meeting? I don't even really know, but I met a reporter and they wrote about my story and about what I was trying to do within the hospital. And it was more of just an idea, right? At the time, it was like I had a business card and an idea. I didn't have a 501 or anything just yet. And not that long after that story ran in the paper, I got a call from the CEO of the hospital and he invited me to breakfast.
Wow.
And okay, so that was really, really scary. And I still remember like picking out my outfit and being very, very nervous and the whole thing all over again and really fighting all of those insecurities and anxieties about what am I doing here? I was invited into his office. They had breakfast brought into his office. And it, of course, it's like the C-suite offices, very, very nice.
So now it's no longer a tiny office in the NICU. It's like corner office with a bunch of windows, right?
Right. And just the kindest man and just wanted to hear about my experience within his hospital and talking about what we were trying to do. And by the end of that meeting, I had a promise of a financial investment.
Wow.
And it was kind of that first big win, acknowledging this is needed. And it just began to, I don't want to say snowball because I think it was much slower than that.
Snowflake.
I think it speaks volumes about that hospital that both the CEO and Rhonda were receptive to your suggestions, that they didn't say, well, who are you to tell us how to run our company?
We're professionals.
Yeah. And like, are your babies doing well? Then we did our job, you know, but that they listened to your feedback. And it just shows that they really do care about the wellness of their patients, that they want to care deeply for the people who come into their hospital.
I couldn't agree more. And both are Christians, and we connected on that level of faith as well. And, you know, I believe strongly that you have to have a plan. My board has often told me that, you know, hope and prayer are not a plan. And I agree. But I also say there is no plan without prayer. And I cannot think that that was not God in motion, making those doors open.
So this is the moment in Kelly's story that makes me want to sing that song, The Next Right Thing from Frozen 2, where it's just sort of like putting one foot in front of the other, crawling out of the abyss.
Yes, I love her description that looking back, she can see that it was God in motion. It's just so beautiful.
Take that next meeting, make that next phone call, write that next email update. Let God take care of the big stuff, and you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, right?
Yeah, I mean, trusting him to provide the opportunities, and then you have to do the work to make it happen.
Yeah, you share the message that's on your heart to share, and you keep serving the people who are put in front of you. And maybe today will be just like any other day, or maybe it'll be the day where everything changes. We just never know in advance.
Okay, friends, you need to get ready because Kelly's birth story is riveting.
So if you're a bit squirmy when it comes to stories involving the hospital or the emergency room, you might want to skip this part. But for the rest of you brave souls, come back in time with us to the year 2000. This actually reminds me of a pretty awesome thing that I just discovered while researching the year 2000.
Okay. Does it have to do with space?
No.
Okay.
But it does have to do with technology.
Okay.
In the year 2000, the first system enabling the selection, automatic downloading, and storage of serial episodic audio content on PCs and portable devices was launched by the early MP3 player manufacturer i2Go.
What? Words, technology.
I know. I know that sounded like a bunch of jargon, but let me translate.
Okay.
The podcast was invented.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, thank you, year 2000.
Wow. That seems like pretty recent history.
It is recent history. I mean, it's like 21 years ago.
Wow. Is it sad for you to think about a world with no podcasts?
I mean, I'm sad for my past self who didn't know about them then.
Yeah.
But I celebrate the invention. Happy birthday,
That's
podcast.
right, David. Look at you living in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Heart full of gratitude.
That's right. And while computer programmers were frantically coding away, getting podcasts ready for us all, Kelly's life was about to turn upside down.
Act 1, A Fragile Gift. As a 26-year-old, Kelly was working at her dream job at a high-tech PR firm in Austin. As she went through the motions of an ordinary workday, her life quickly took a dramatic turn. This act includes a red truck, a loaf of bread, and a full circle moment.
I worked at a high-tech PR firm. I absolutely loved my job. I had worked a full day. It was kind of towards the end of the day, and I didn't feel right. You know, when you just know something's not quite right. And I decided that I would leave early and try to miss some of rush hour traffic.
How far into your pregnancy were you?
I didn't know. I know now. I was 24 weeks. As I went down the elevator, I had some sharp pains. And there were people in the elevator, and I started to say something. But it had always been my intention that I was going to work until the day I delivered, that I was going to come back to work. It was just like I wasn't going to be the complaining pregnant person. I was just like, I don't know why that was so important to me, but I was just like, it wasn't going to let it slow me down, right? And so I got in the car, and right as I took the ramp to get on to the interstate, there was a wreck, or, there was just, all I saw was taillights. And those pains came back. And I had not had any kind of birthing class. This is my first pregnancy. I didn't know anything about it. I don't have a sister. I don't, no one close to me had I been through with this. And so I just kept driving and inching forward. And I remember turning the volume up and down on my radio. And I remember turning the air off and on because I was really hot. And then I was moving my chair back to kind of relieve the pressure. And I was like, what is going on? Should I go in and have this checked? And I had heard so many stories of women going in and being told, oh, it's just Braxton Hicks and you'll be fine. And just, and so I was like, I don't want to go to the hospital. I don't even know which hospital, because at the time I hadn't even determined where I was delivering, right? So it was just a lot of confusion. But I also think I was really trying to calm myself and downplay it. Like, everything's fine. And so I just had in my mind, just get home. If you can just get home, you'll be fine. And so I got home, and my husband was there, and he normally would not have been there, but he was playing in an intramural baseball league, and he had a game. So he came home to change, and he was going to the game. And so I was like, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want him to not go to his game. And then I just looked at him and I started crying, and I was like, something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but something's wrong. And to this day, I laugh when I think about it, that instead of calling 911, we called our moms. So I called my mom, and I couldn't get in touch with her. She was out of town. And so we called his mom, and she lives in Michigan, and she asked me questions that I had not asked myself. Like, I didn't even know that much about having a pregnancy and a baby to ask myself these questions. She had asked me if I was bleeding, and I was like, I didn't even occur to me that I might be bleeding. So I went to the bathroom, and there was some blood, and she just said, call 911. And so, I'm sorry, it is just like I'm right back there every single time. Laid down on the bathroom floor, and I remember I had a dachshund, and he was just licking my face, and my husband's on the phone with the paramedics, and they came very quickly. We had a fire station pretty close, and they assessed me, and they really thought everything was fine, and then the ambulance came, and they felt like everything was fine, but my husband was just like, we have insurance, take her, and I just think that's so interesting that we were like, we have insurance, right? Take me in the ambulance. But I just praise God for him that he knew, like, the best thing for me was to get in that ambulance and just make sure everything's fine. And so, there were no lights and sirens, none of that. They just took me in, off we went to the hospital. It was about, I think, a 35-minute drive. Ugh. At the time, there were no lights and sirens. We were just on the road and in traffic again. And I could see my husband behind us, and he had a red truck, and I could see out the window. I would look every once in a while. And I kept telling the paramedic, like, when I would have pains. And they had me lay on my side. And, it was just, again, it made me feel like I was overreacting because they were so calm about it. They just acted like nothing was wrong. And then about halfway there, she wrote something on the clipboard, and she handed it up to the driver. And I was like, what did you write? And she said, I'm going to start an IV. You're in labor. And it was like the sirens came on, and we started going really fast. And you have to have humor in all of this. All I could think of is I was wearing my friend's maternity outfit, how you borrow from your friends. And I was like, please don't cut the pants. Just please let me take them off. Don't cut them. Because I didn't want to ruin her outfit. And I was really worried about where my shoes were. They had taken my shoes. And I was like, everything went in fast forward. And my poor husband, all he heard was sirens and lights, right?
Right.
Can you imagine, Dave? Like, you don't know what's happening, right?
Right.
And so we went to the hospital, and they took me in, and I still remember, like, they bumped the bed into the wall, and like the whole thing was just chaotic and crazy. And they put me in this really small, dark room, and a young nurse came, and she assessed me. And so when she went to check my cervix, my water broke. And she said, and it still resonates, like I can hear her say it. She said, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do.
Ugh.
I don't even think I had really comprehended that my husband was standing there, and he lost it. And I was embarrassed because we don't act like that, right? You know, we have decorum and we are kind and we don't act like that. But he was yelling and screaming and saying, get someone in here that knows what they're doing. But he had some extra words in there. And it happened very, very fast. You know, it was like a scene on ER, right? They rush you into an operating room and there was just so many people. I didn't know who was for what, and an anesthesiologist team was talking to me and they were trying to decide if they're going to put me to sleep or if I was going to push. And I was telling them, I was like, I don't know how to push. I haven't had a class. I don't know what I'm doing. And then we had someone trying to like ask us insurance questions, and another nurse was asking how far I was, and I said 23 and Mike said 24. We were arguing with all this going on of how many weeks I was. And he was like, no, because it's a Monday and your week changes. And so you would...
Oh, gosh.
So she had the date wheel, right? And so she's looking at it and she says 24 weeks viability. Like she's telling them 24 weeks. And I didn't even know what that meant. Like I didn't know that the baby could live. I honestly thought, when the lady said there's nothing we can do, that the baby was gone and they were just basically trying to save me. They were telling me the baby was transverse and so I was going to have a C-section.
Were you even, like, were you crying at this point? Were you just in shock? What was going on in your mind?
I was saying I was sorry over and over. I just thought I worked too hard. I should have gone home. I cleaned the house yesterday. Like I had caused us to lose this baby. And so I was just telling my husband over and over, I was so, so sorry. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I was saying, call the insurance company because I knew I had to get approval for a C-section. Isn't that funny? Like that's how much I knew. I was just like, call them because I know they were like, no, all bets off. We don't need that. And don't lose my pants, right? Because I gotta give them that.
Priorities.
When I woke up, I was in a recovery room. It's just like a crazy, crazy dream, but my sister's boyfriend, he was boyfriend at the time, they later got married, he was with me. I'm like, why are you here? Like, what's happening?
Gandalf? It's kind of like, what?
It was very
Where
odd.
am I?
And so the nurse told me that my baby was in the NICU. And I didn't know what a NICU was. And I said, the baby lived. And she said, yes, you have a baby girl. And he said, no, it's a boy. And I was like, it lived? Like, I have a baby? And so it was, again, like confusion. And
Wow.
no, it's a boy and he's in the NICU. And what is the NICU? Like, and you're on a lot of medication and drugs and everything. So you're just trying to like figure it all out. I don't know how much longer it took, but when I was in the hospital room and Michael was with me and we were waiting for my parents. They live almost 5 hours away, and they made it in record time. My dad's a former highway patrolman, and I think he used all his skills that night to get there as fast as he could get. They talk about, like, they wanted to see the baby before it died. So I think all of us, and this is 20 years ago. He was the cusp of viability.
Wow.
Had he been earlier, they would not have worked to save him. Now, 24-weekers have a much higher success rate and do better after discharge. But then that was really the cusp of viability. So important that we got to that 24-week mark. So my parents came and there were quite a few people in my room, and I teased my sweet, sweet friend Angela because she showed up with a loaf of bread. And I just think that is so cool because in her mind, people were going to be hungry. And what did she have? And so she just grabbed whatever she had. And I still just so vividly remember her walking in with a loaf of bread. So they brought in pictures of the baby, and I don't remember if it was my husband that brought them in or a nurse, but they were Polaroid pictures, and I just had the hardest time making out a baby in this picture. Like, it just didn't look like a baby, and I was just horrified. I so wish we had an opportunity to prepare moms before they see the baby. And we're working on this. We talk a lot about how would we do this? How would we get the opportunity to prepare a mom before she walks into the NICU for the first time? Because they came to get me about 3 a.m, and I had an emergency C-section. So that's not a planned C-section where they cut and everything's pretty. It was an emergency C-section, and quite painful. And they put me in a wheelchair, and we're going down this really long hallway. And of course, we pass by the nursery. So we've given that feedback. If it's possible, don't take a NICU mom by the nursery. Yeah. It was a place in the hospital I didn't even know existed. I didn't know what NICU stands for, neonatal intensive care. I thought it was really odd that the doors were locked and you had to be buzzed in. And they showed me how to scrub. And we're all very aware of scrubbing now with COVID, but back then, you were scrubbing as if you were going in for surgery. And they took me to his bed to see him. And it was just an out-of-body, overwhelming, traumatizing experience. And you just don't think about that when you're thinking about meeting your baby for the first time, right? You just envision your husband's there and the baby comes and you put him on your chest, and it's just this glorious, beautiful thing. But this was just, it's just so hard to describe what it felt like. I was in a lot of pain. They had me stand up out of the wheelchair so I could look into the bed to see him. And the neonatologist was there and telling us, all the challenges that he faced. So the first was just to breathe, and they were talking about, the lungs are one of the last organs to develop, and he has premature lungs, and we won't know how he responds for the first few hours, and he's on this ventilator that's breathing for him. And they talked about a brain bleed, which is very common when babies are born that small because of their tiny blood vessels. And depending on the level of the bleed, that will determine if he has cerebral palsy or mental retardation. He may lose his sight. He may have hearing loss. It was so overwhelming. And I just wanted to leave. I wanted to go back to my room. And for years, I struggled with that guilt of not wanting to see the pictures, not wanting to go to the NICU, not wanting to stay there and be with him and fight with him, right? You would think, I think now, automatic reaction would have been praying over him. But it wasn't. It was a retreat. It was I can't do this. This is beyond what I'm capable of doing. So that is the introduction of the NICU for me, and it's still so raw, and even after years of therapy, and I've come so far, but it is true post-traumatic stress, and I didn't want to acknowledge or admit that I had PTSD because I really thought that was for military veterans or someone who had been raped or had a horrific car accident, that I just didn't feel like I should claim that. But when you look at the automatic physical reactions that you have to a certain smell or a sound in that experience, it is classic PTSD. Your constant re-exposure, you talk about if you were in a war zone and, living in that constant fear and anxiety, that's what you experience in the NICU. You're going in every day into that environment. And there's a lot of sounds and lights and confusion. And it takes a lot to get your sea legs. And I think that's why what we do is so important, is really helping parents navigate that experience and become confident and feel like a mom or a dad, and to help them see how they need to support each other through the experience.
How long were you in the NICU with Jackson before you went home?
4 months. I think 105 days. One of the most traumatizing days, like when you look at the span of 4 months. There were little traumas that happened along the way, but I knew I was being discharged on the 5th day. I could only stay in the hospital 5 days. But I hadn't really thought about the fact that that meant I'm not going to be near him and what that's going to mean. We were just focused on the 5th day because we had been told if a valve didn't close in his heart, then on the 5th day, he would have to have surgery. So on the morning of the 5th day, he had surgery. So if you can imagine, it's heart surgery on a 1-pound baby. Ugh. And people from the church came and prayed with us and were there with us through it, and he did well. But it was just like, as soon as it was over, it was like, okay, you have to go home now. And customary to a hospital, I had to leave in a wheelchair. So I still don't know who it was that pushed me. If it was, I was probably a volunteer, but they took me down in the wheelchair and probably having no idea of my story whatsoever, and parked me by a mom with her baby and her balloons and her flowers. So we're both sitting there waiting for our husbands to bring the car. And I had held it together until that moment. And then it was like all the rush of the emotion of he's lived through the heart surgery, you're going home, you're leaving him here. And I was sobbing. And that person, bless their heart, they said, don't ruin this for her. Ugh. And it never occurred to me to question that. I was like, oh, absolutely. You're like, and so kind of sucked it all in and didn't know the impact of doing that.
Wow.
Because that was kind of the first time where it was like, you know what? It's not okay that you show all this emotion. People don't really want to know. People just want you to say that you're okay and you're fine and you're doing great and you shouldn't break down. Just took all the energy I had just to navigate those first 6 weeks. And then at 6 weeks, I had to go back to work to keep my insurance. And I think the additional challenges, I really feel for families, families that if you work shift work and you can't miss your shift, right? Or you're not going to have a job to come back to.
I mean, based on your experience, it almost sounds like one of the most valuable things that Hand to Hold has to offer to these parents is just the message that it's okay to not be okay.
Absolutely. It is absolutely. And you are in a safe environment to be honest. And, I didn't talk about not feeling bonded to Jackson. I've never admitted that openly to anybody. And I read a book years and years later by Casey Matthews, Premie, Lessons in Love, Life, and Motherhood. And that is the first time that I had seen in writing or heard another mother talk about seeing their baby for the first time and how she wouldn't go to the NICU and how her husband just stood in the doorway with pictures and like trying to coax her into the NICU, and how when she saw her daughter, like she thought it looked like an alien baby and it couldn't be her baby. There's just no way this can be my baby. And until I read that, I thought I was the only one that felt that way. I felt so much guilt over that. And so we talk a lot about that. And that's not every NICU parent has that feeling. But if you do, it's okay.
Right.
I didn't have time to prepare my mind and my heart if someone had just taken a few moments to tell me what to expect. I think in my mind there was going to be a few sick babies, but they would look like real babies. And then we walk in there and they call them bays, but I think at the time they had 3 bays. So there were probably 40 babies. And they're in every stage of development, and there's so much equipment. It just, you can't blame yourself if you've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, it probably feels more like a science lab than a nursery.
It absolutely does. It is a happy moment walking out of there, taking your baby home. We were terrified even to go on the interstate. It's like drive back roads, and I'm sure that's the same for new parents with newborns. But it's like, just get this fragile package home. And, he had to have surgery again several months later. And that was very difficult. It was just the ongoing medications and doctor's appointments and just trying to balance all of that. I was still working at the time. And it wasn't until he was 1 that I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I want to be the one with him. He was doing speech and occupational and physical therapies and had lots of specialty appointments with doctors. And I didn't want a nanny doing something like that. Like that just, like, why would you, so we had to make some adjustments. But I remember Michael very early on, he was like, why would we save for college if he can't go to kindergarten? Let's invest everything we've got right now into his development. And we did. There was no therapy that I wasn't willing to try for this baby. Today, I tell you, like, you really wouldn't know. And, there are things that are still hard for him. He doesn't like me to talk about it, but he never has been great in art and coloring and things like that. But he is great at editing. And he learned that early on, that was a special skill for him. He actually produces my podcast and does all that editing.
Wow.
But he's at Belmont University there in Nashville.
No way.
Studying motion pictures and film editing. And he truly has a gift and a talent. And we're just really proud to see where he's come. A full circle moment. Just a few weeks ago, I was invited to give the opening message to a global conference for neonatologists. It's called Hot Topics in Neonatology. And so I did the intro and Jackson did the editing, and we produced this little short 2-3 minute video. But it just felt like full circle for us to go from being in the NICU to working together to produce this story that neonatologists from around the world got to hear why what they do matters and show them the product of what they do every day for NICU families.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Gave me chills.
If you had had a healthy baby for both of your deliveries, do you think that a passion for neonatal intensive care would even have been on your radar?
No. I would like to think that I still would have had a heart for charity and nonprofit. When I worked at the PR firm, I had the pro bono account. So I got to lead the campaigns for the nonprofit that we provided pro bono support for. But I would have not devoted my life to it, right? And I look back now in that job I love so, so much. And it was a high-tech PR firm. None of the technologies I worked on then even exist now. The things that I stressed over and lost sleep over and planned, I'm sure they matter. I'm sure they led to the development of the things that we have now, but not at the level of touching someone and guiding them through trauma, right? Not at the level of holding someone's hand, like hand to hold. So I'm grateful. I want this to live on beyond me. I hope I have built something with such a strong foundation that it'll just continue to grow and flourish.
It's incredible to me how she was able to turn one of the most traumatic moments of her life into something beautiful, into an organization that's now touched the lives of thousands of families.
Absolutely. It's very inspiring to see the work that she's been able to do. And now we have to end our show, but not before our final segment, which we like to call
Let's Rewind the Tape!
Kelli is the founder of Hand to Hold, which educates and connects NICU parents and families around the world.
Because Kelli found healing and experienced deep connection with other NICU parents like her friend Kira.
And because Kelli found support from the staff and administrators at St. David's Medical Center in Austin, Texas.
After she delivered 2 premature babies at that same hospital. To find out more about Kelli and Hand to Hold, visit handtohold.org.
This episode of Instrumental was produced by me, JJ Heller.
And me, Dave Heller.
Our theme music is my song, Big Love, Small Moments.
That I helped write.
To find out more about me, listen to more of my songs, or watch my music videos, please visit jjheller.com. That's 2 letter J's, HELLER.com.
We'll be back next week with another episode of Instrumental.
So be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.